Hello, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of It's Your City. I'm your host, Courtney Bloomer. Today's episode is brought to you by Classy Seconds Thrift Shop. Classy Seconds features daily sales. Visit their Facebook page to learn what's on sale today at Classy Seconds. Our guest for today's show is Myron Friedman. He's the director of the Nevada State Museum here in Carson City. Welcome, Myron.
Thank you.
All right, the Nevada State Museum is a great showpiece in our downtown, and a lot of new activities are happening at the museum right now. Tell us a couple of highlights.
Oh, we have lots of stuff going on at the museum. We've been very active lately with cultural programming, but coming up immediately on St. Patrick's Day is a book signing with women authors celebrating Women's History Month. We've got some wonderful authors talking about different Nevada subjects, and they'll have their books there as well for book signings, including Patty Cafferata and Mona Bernard and, Patty Bernard and Mona Reno talking about the creation of the Sarah Winnemucca statue, which can be seen in the Capitol building. So some really interesting topics. The last Friday of each month, we do our coin press demonstrations. So if you're not familiar with the old coin press in the Nevada State Museum, it is the original coin press in the Mint building, which is what the Nevada State Museum is housed in, the U.S. Branch Mint in Carson City. Very historic. And the coin press is operational. So the last Friday of each month, we do demonstrations. And if you're interested, a visitor can purchase a blank silver coin, silver planchette they're called before they're minted. And we will mint them their very own silver medallion on the historic coin press. This is the last Friday of every month. Coming up in April, the last Saturday of April, we're doing Hawaiian Lei Day. This is the May Day of Hawaii, and we're going to be celebrating with cultural dances and music and lei demonstrations, lei making demonstrations. And that's going to be the last Saturday at the Nevada State Museum, 10 a.m., and it should be a lot of fun.
All right, and tell us a little bit more about that event, why we're focusing on Hawaii at the Nevada State Museum.
Well, we're focusing on many cultures in Nevada, and it just happens to be Polynesian culture in late April. May Day is actually the following weekend, but because that's also Cinco de Mayo, we didn't want to get too busy on one single Saturday, so we picked the 28th of April to celebrate this Polynesian Cultural Day. But we just finished with Chinese New Year, and we also did Day of the Dead. So the Nevada State Museum is a museum for everybody in Nevada, and so we're making an effort in the coming years to really reach out and present programming that will be interesting to not just our everyday visitors, but to also those special audiences that need to know that their story too is being told at the Nevada State Museum.
All right, fantastic. Now you're relatively new in the directorship at the museum. What brought you to the museum?
Yeah, I will celebrate a year as the new director in April. Prior to that, I was the director of a museum in Southern California, the Museum of Ventura County, and prior to that, of a museum in the Bay Area, the Hayward Area Historical Society. And I also worked in Palo Alto on a new museum. And while I was working on that museum, we were establishing a new museum of history in Palo Alto. I heard about the opening at the Nevada State Museum. Well, I grew up in Reno, Nevada. My wife grew up in Reno, Nevada. We lived there as kids. We graduated from UNR. My parents at the time were both still with us, and my mother-in-law, and so my sisters and my brothers, and I just thought, wouldn't it be fun to come home again and lead not only the most wonderful museum in the state of Nevada, but also the very first museum I ever visited as a kid. And so that museum, this museum, had a big impact on me then, and it's just an honor to be back again leading it. So it's just sort of like the dream job come true.
Back home again here in Nevada.
Here in Nevada, yep.
The Nevada State Museum, as you mentioned, has a whole lot of different attractions. There are special events, there are galleries. What's your favorite exhibit?
Oh gosh, my favorite exhibit. Oh, there are so many. We have an amazing exhibit called Under One Sky. These are Native American artifacts. But the exhibit itself is very special in that it was created by a partnership with the Native American community. So the stories you see in that exhibit are told from the perspective of both archaeologists and Native Americans. And they're quite different perspectives. So I think it's a very important exhibit, not just for the artifacts you get to see, but for seeing these two perspectives side by side. So you start to understand why Native Americans are so interested in preserving culture in a way that makes sense to them. But of course, we also have the coin press, as I mentioned, and the historic mint building. So those two things together are absolutely an unparalleled experience in the world. And I don't mean to sound like I'm exaggerating, but think about it. Here you have the historic mint building that is still being preserved as the museum, and you have the very first coin press that ever worked in that museum, and they're together and the coin press is operating. You cannot find a coin press on this planet that has the same provenance as this coin press does in its original location of operation. So it makes the museum extremely unique. But we have many other things too. We have a wonderful altar that was preserved from the Carson City Chinatown before it was all torn down. So this was preserved by a sheriff at the time in the 1940s who understood the importance of preserving this last relic from this historic Chinatown area. And that is in our museum. It's a beautiful altar piece that was in what was known as the Joss House. So this would have been sort of the spiritual gathering place in the Carson City Chinatown. Very important artifact.
People don't realize that Carson City had a Chinatown.
Exactly.
But the Chinese community played an important part in developing our area.
In developing Nevada, yeah. Absolutely. Think about the work that was done on the railroads, but also with the mines and also in the timber industry. And they ended up establishing businesses that we all found, that the rest of the community found to be absolutely key, as in restaurants and laundries and what have you. And frankly, you wouldn't have gotten a fresh vegetable in your diet if you did not have a Chinese community in your area, because they were the ones who knew how to garden and grow fresh vegetables, and they used them in their own cooking and in the restaurants they established. So you can thank the Chinese community for providing some element of good health to early Nevadans.
All right, so that exhibit, what else is there?
Well, we have an exhibit on World War I, and as many of you may remember, this has been the 100th anniversary of World War I. Last year marked the 100th anniversary of America's entry into World War I. 2018 marks the end of the war. So we have had an exhibit of very special photographs on exhibit this whole time since April of last year. This was a collection of photographs from a Carson City collector who had this collection of photographs of the Americans training over in Europe during that period 100 years ago. So it's an incredible collection of photographs, and we've paired that with some amazing World War I artifacts and some special footage too from a film that was made by the War Department at the time that's really interesting, showing the troops mustering and everything. It's really fascinating. So that exhibit is up through November, which is when Armistice Day happens, and that will be mark the end of the 100th anniversary celebration of the end of the war. We have many other things on exhibit. Really special things, like if you're familiar with Mr. Glenn Lucky traveling up and down the streets of Carson City, we have Glenn's bike on exhibit that he is actually a trike that he used to ride from Carson City to Washington, D.C. in the 1980s. So we are he gave that to the museum, and we are preserving it, and you can see that on exhibit. In honor of the recent Olympics, we put up a small exhibit of Korean artifacts we happen to have in our collection, so that's kind of fascinating. And of course, we have our ongoing exhibits of Nevada history, and who doesn't love going down in the old mine?
Right.
One of my favorite exhibits is the old mine exhibit in the basement of the Mint building, and that is the exhibit that kind of turned me on as a kid and made me fall in love with museums, was going to that old mine exhibit. And you know what? It still looks the same.
And kids today still go through there.
They still do. They're still a little bit afraid, which I think makes it kind of exciting. But it's a great old exhibit, and frankly, you won't find a finer exhibit about mining than that exhibit, in terms of putting you in an environment that really is like the mines that were worked in Nevada during that time period.
All right. Myron Friedman is the director of the Nevada State Museum. Lots of upcoming events, lots of fantastic exhibits. Tell us the website. Where can people go to learn more?
If you go to nevadaculture.org and then look for the Nevada State Museum, Carson City, you'll come to our website.
All right, and people can go there to find upcoming exhibits and special events that are taking place at the museum. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
What a great cultural resource this is to Carson City residents and visitors, and we hope folks will go down and check out what's happening at the museum.
Great, thank you.
All right, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this week's edition of It's Your City, brought to you by Classy Seconds Thrift Shop. Check out Classy Seconds at their brand new building on Highway 50 East in Carson City. If your business would like to sponsor a future edition of It's Your City, please contact Darla at the address shown on your screen. I'm your host, Courtney Bloomer. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.